Most people think self-worth is something you discover. A feeling you stumble into when you finally achieve enough, earn enough, become enough. That's the lie. And it's costing you everything. Every morning you wake up and hand your worth to someone else to judge. You hand it to your boss, to your followers, to the stranger whose eyes you can't quite meet. You hand it to a world that has never once promised to give it back. Here's the truth nobody wants to say out loud. Self-worth isn't something you discover. It's something you reclaim by deciding, once and for all, that no one's opinion of you outranks your own judgment of yourself. That's it. That's the whole reset. And it will change everything about how you move through the world. Let me tell you what inferiority actually is, because most people misunderstand it completely. Inferiority is not the absence of confidence. It's not a personality trait. It's not something you were born with or something life stamped onto you. Inferiority is a daily decision. It's a decision you make every time you let someone else's evaluation of you carry more weight than your own. Every time you shrink so someone else feels comfortable. Every time you say yes when your body is screaming no. Every time you perform a version of yourself that you think will be approved rather than the version that is actually you. That is inferiority. Not a feeling. A pattern. A pattern you keep choosing because no one ever told you there was another option. There was a man named Epictetus. He was born a slave. He was beaten so severely his leg was permanently damaged. He lived with nothing, owned nothing, and had no social standing whatsoever. And yet, 2,000 years later, his words outlasted emperors. Because Epictetus understood something that most people never figure out in an entire lifetime. He understood that your worth is the one thing in this world that is completely, entirely, unshakably under your control. Not partially. Not mostly. Completely. The only catch is that you have to put it in the right place. Epictetus taught that most suffering comes from trying to control what is outside your power and neglecting what is within it. And here is the deepest application of that principle, the one most people miss. Your sense of worth, if it depends on anything external, anything at all, is not yours. It belongs to whoever or whatever you've tethered it to. If your worth depends on being liked, it belongs to other people's moods. If it depends on achievement, it belongs to outcomes you can't fully control. If it depends on appearance, it belongs to time itself, and time is undefeated. You wake up every morning and you've placed your most valuable possession, your sense of your own value, in someone else's hands. And then you wonder why you feel anxious. You wonder why you feel hollow. You wonder why no amount of success or approval ever feels like enough. It's because you keep going to a well that has no bottom. So let me ask you something. And I want you to actually sit with this. Whose opinion of you matters more to you than your own? Whose approval are you chasing right now that you've decided you need before you can feel okay? A parent. A partner. A boss. An audience. A version of yourself from 5 years ago that you're still trying to prove wrong. Name it. Because until you name it, it runs you. And anything that runs you without being named is not a habit. It's a cage. Here's what nobody tells you about the pattern of people-pleasing. It doesn't come from kindness. It comes from fear. Somewhere along the way, you learned a strategy. The strategy was simple. If you are good enough, helpful enough, accommodating enough, easy enough, then maybe you won't be rejected. Maybe you won't be abandoned. Maybe you'll finally be loved. So you became the person who never says no. The person who absorbs everyone else's stress. The person who makes themselves smaller so others can be bigger. And you called it being a good person. But it's not goodness. It's a contract. An unwritten contract that says, I will give you whatever you want, and in exchange, you will tell me I have value. The problem is the other party never signed. And they keep collecting without ever paying up. This is the trap that keeps you locked in. The more you people please, the more you signal to yourself and to the world that your needs don't matter. And the more you signal that your needs don't matter, the less you respect yourself. And the less you respect yourself, the more desperate you become for external validation, which makes you people please even more. It's a downward spiral dressed up as niceness. And it will eat your entire life if you let it. You'll spend decades being everything for everyone and wonder why you still don't feel whole. You'll wonder why you still don't feel like you. Because you gave yourself away one compromise at a time and called it love. Let me be very clear about something. Giving away your power to control how others perceive you is not generosity. It's self-abandonment. Every time you make a decision based on what will make someone else happy at the expense of what you know is right for you, you betray yourself. And every self-betrayal, even the small ones, especially the small ones, chips away at the foundation of who you are. Until one day you look in the mirror and you don't recognize the person looking back. Not because they've changed beyond recognition, but because they've contorted beyond recognition. You've bent yourself into so many shapes for so many people that you've forgotten what your natural posture is. Now here's where it gets interesting, because there's a deeper layer to this that most people never reach. There are two versions of you that are constantly at war. Think of them as two selves. One self is built for the outside world. This self has a resume. This self has achievements. This self is concerned with how it appears, what it has accomplished, what titles it holds, what numbers it can point to. This self lives on comparison. It needs to be better than, or at least equal to, and it is terrified of being less than. This self is fed by applause and starved by silence. And most people spend their entire lives building only this self. The other self has no resume. This self has character. This self is concerned not with what it has achieved but with what it has overcome inside itself. Its currency is not awards or accolades. Its currency is integrity, honesty, courage, the ability to stand alone, the willingness to be misunderstood. This self doesn't need applause because it doesn't perform. It simply is. And here's the tragedy. Most people never build this self. They pour all their energy into the first one, the one that looks good on paper, the one that gets the nod of approval, the one that wins the comparison game. And they wonder why, at the end of the day, when the applause fades and they're alone in the quiet, they feel empty. Because the self they've been building was never designed to sustain them. It was designed to impress others. And impressing others is a hunger that is never satisfied. You feel inferior because you've been measuring yourself with the wrong ruler. You've been measuring the first self, the resume self, the one that was always going to come up short because there is always someone smarter, richer, more attractive, more successful. That's not a flaw in you. That's a mathematical certainty. If your worth is tied to comparison, you will always lose eventually. Not because you're not enough, but because the game has no finish line and no winner. It's designed to keep you running. The reset is this. You stop building the self that needs to be seen and you start building the self that can stand alone. You shift your daily energy from proving to building. From performing to becoming. From seeking approval to cultivating character. And this is not some abstract philosophical shift. It's concrete. It shows up in the smallest decisions of your day. When someone criticizes you and your first instinct is to defend, to explain, to justify, to make them understand, that's the resume self talking. That's the self that cannot tolerate being seen as less than. Building the other self means letting them think what they think. It means sitting with the discomfort of being misunderstood without rushing to correct the record. Because the other self doesn't need to be understood by everyone. It only needs to be understood by you. When you're about to say yes to something you don't want to do, and you feel that tightness in your chest, that knot in your stomach, that's your body telling you you're about to betray yourself again. Building the other self means pausing in that moment. It means recognizing that the tightness is not weakness. It's your integrity trying to speak. And saying no, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it disappoints someone, is not aggression. It's self-respect. It's the Stoic art of declining without explanation, without apology, without the need to be perceived as good for declining. You don't owe anyone a performance of goodness. You owe yourself alignment. Now I want you to understand something about values, because this is where the real transformation happens. Not all values are created equal. Some values are what I call internally generated. They come from your own experience, your own reflection, your own sense of what matters. Values like honesty. Like courage. Like the willingness to tell the truth even when it costs you. Like the commitment to treat people with dignity regardless of what they can do for you. These values are reality-based. They don't depend on outcomes. They don't depend on other people's reactions. You can practice them in a room alone. You can practice them in a prison cell. You can practice them when everyone you love has turned against you. They hold. They are yours. And then there are values that are externally dependent. Values like being liked by everyone. Like always appearing successful. Like never feeling uncomfortable. Like being the person everyone goes to, everyone relies on, everyone praises. These values are not really values. They are traps dressed up as values. Because they require the cooperation of the external world to be fulfilled. You cannot be liked by everyone, and the moment someone doesn't like you, your worth collapses. You cannot always appear successful, and the moment you fail publicly, your identity shatters. You cannot never feel uncomfortable, and the moment discomfort arrives, you reach for the nearest anesthetic. These values, these bad values, are the architecture of inferiority. Because they place your worth in territories you do not control. Here is what the Stoics understood that took me years to internalize. The moment you place your sense of worth on anything outside your control, you become a slave to that thing. Not metaphorically. Literally. Your mood, your confidence, your sense of self rises and falls with forces you cannot govern. You become weather. You are no longer a person with a center. You are a reaction to conditions. And conditions change constantly. So you are constantly anxious, constantly adjusting, constantly performing, constantly scanning the room for signals about whether you're okay. That is not a life. That is survival. And it's the survival of someone who has forgotten they have a choice. The choice is this. You decide what you value, and you make sure those values are things you control. You stop valuing being liked and you start valuing being honest, even when honesty costs you approval. You stop valuing appearing strong and you start valuing doing what's right, even when doing what's right looks like weakness to everyone watching. You stop valuing comfort and you start valuing growth, even when growth feels like standing in a fire. Because here's the secret about values. Your values are not what you say you care about. Your values are what your daily actions reveal you care about. And right now, If you're honest with yourself, your daily actions reveal that you value approval more than integrity, comfort more than truth, and other people's opinions more than your own. That's not a judgment. That's an observation. And it's the observation that sets you free, because once you see it, you can change it. So how do you change it? How do you actually reset? Not in theory. In practice. In the texture of your actual life. You start with the morning. Not with a ritual, not with a routine, but with a decision. Before you check your phone, before you let the world pour its demands into your skull, you sit. You sit and you ask yourself one question. What am I building today? Not what am I proving? Not who am I impressing? Not what am I performing? What am I building? And if the answer is nothing, if the answer is that today is just another day of maintaining appearances and collecting approvals, then you haven't reset yet. You're still running the old operating system. The shift from proving to building is the most important shift you will ever make. And it's subtle. It doesn't look dramatic from the outside. The same actions can come from a completely different place. You can go to work, do your job well, speak up in a meeting, and be doing it to prove yourself. Or you can do all of those same things because you are building something. Building competence. Building character. Building a life that reflects who you actually are. The actions are identical. The source is entirely different. And the source is what determines whether you feel inferior or not. When you prove, you are always measuring yourself against someone else. There is always a judge. There is always a verdict. And the verdict is never final, so you never get to rest. When you build, the only question is whether today's work is aligned with your values. There is no judge. There is no verdict. There is only the work and whether it's honest. And that is a game you can actually win. Not because you beat someone else, but because the standard is internal and the standard is yours. Now let me talk about boundaries, because this is where most people get it wrong. They think boundaries are about other people. They're not. Boundaries are about you. A boundary is not a wall you build to keep people out. A boundary is a line you draw to protect what you've decided matters. And what matters, after the reset, is your own integrity. Your own center. Your own sense of self. Most people set boundaries like this. They tolerate too much for too long, until they can't tolerate it anymore, and then they explode. They lash out. They make it dramatic. They write a speech in their head about everything the other person has done wrong. And then they deliver it. And they call it setting a boundary. But that's not a boundary. That's a performance of strength that reveals its own weakness. Because real strength doesn't need to announce itself. The Stoic way of setting a boundary is quiet. It's clean. It has no violence in it. It sounds like this. No. That's it. No explanation. No justification. No 3-paragraph text message laying out your reasoning. No need to be understood. Just no. Or even quieter than that. Just silence. Just absence. Just the simple act of not showing up for something that doesn't serve your values. You don't need to convince anyone that your boundary is reasonable. You don't need their agreement. You don't need them to validate that you had the right to say no. The moment you need someone to understand why you set a boundary, you've already given them authority over whether the boundary is valid. You've already placed their judgment above your own. This is the hardest part for most people. Saying no without explanation feels rude. It feels mean. It feels like you're letting someone down. And here's the truth. You might be letting someone down. That's okay. The question is not whether you disappoint others. The question is whether you're willing to disappoint others in order to stop disappointing yourself. Because right now, you are disappointing yourself every single day. You're just doing it quietly, so quietly that you've stopped noticing. Every yes that should have been a no is a disappointment to yourself. Every silence that should have been a voice is a disappointment to yourself. Every time you let someone's opinion override your own knowing, that's a disappointment to yourself. And those disappointments add up. They accumulate. They form the sediment of inferiority. Let me come back to the thesis, because I want you to feel it, not just understand it. Self-worth isn't something you discover. It's something you reclaim by deciding, once and for all, that no one's opinion of you outranks your own judgment of yourself. Notice what I said. Your own judgment. Not your feelings about yourself. Not your mood. Not whether you feel confident today. Your judgment. Your considered, deliberate, reflective assessment of whether you are living in alignment with your values. That's what matters. Feelings fluctuate. Judgment, when it's grounded in clear values, is stable. You will have days when you feel small, when you feel like you're not enough, when the old inferiority creeps back in. Those feelings are not the truth. They are weather. And the Stoics understood that weather passes. What remains is the structure you've built underneath. The character. The values. The quiet, unshakable knowledge that you are not measuring yourself by anyone else's ruler anymore. I want to tell you something about Marcus Aurelius. Here was a man who had everything the world says you need to feel worthy. He was the most powerful man on earth. He was Emperor of Rome. He had wealth, status, authority, and the ability to command anyone to do anything. And yet, every morning, he sat alone and wrote himself reminders not to need any of it. He reminded himself that the applause of crowds is meaningless. That the opinions of others are noise. That the only thing that matters is whether his soul is aligned with what is good and true. The most powerful man in the world was practicing the same discipline I'm asking you to practice. The discipline of not needing external power to feel internally grounded. If the Emperor of Rome needed to practice this every single morning, what makes you think you can wing it? What makes you think you can just figure it out as you go? You can't. This requires practice. It requires repetition. It requires the daily, unglamorous work of choosing your own judgment over the world's noise. Again and again and again. Not because it feels good. Often it feels terrible. But because it's the only thing that actually works. Here's what happens when you start to live this way. At first, it's uncomfortable. People who are used to your compliance will resist. They will call you selfish. They will say you've changed. They will try to pull you back into the old dynamic, because the old dynamic served them. And you will feel the pull. You will feel the guilt. You will hear the voice that says, maybe I am being selfish. Maybe I should just go along. Maybe I'm making a big deal out of nothing. That voice is not wisdom. That voice is the old operating system running its final programs. Let it run. Let it say its piece. And then do what you know is right anyway. Over time, something shifts. The discomfort doesn't disappear, but it changes character. It goes from the discomfort of self-betrayal to the discomfort of self-respect. And let me tell you, those are two very different kinds of pain. The pain of self-betrayal is hollow. It eats you from the inside. It leaves you less than you were. The pain of self-respect is solid. It builds you. It leaves you more than you were. Because every time you choose your own judgment over someone else's approval, you add a brick to the foundation of your self-worth. And brick by brick, day by day, the foundation becomes real. Not a feeling. Not a hope. A structure. And one day, not long from now, someone will criticize you. Or dismiss you. Or ignore you. And you'll wait for the old feeling to arrive, the inferiority, the shrinking, the desperate need to prove yourself. And it won't come. Or it will come, but it will be quiet, distant, like a radio playing in another room. And you'll realize something has changed. Not because the world changed. Not because people got nicer. Not because you finally achieved enough to feel okay. But because you stopped asking the world whether you were okay and started answering the question yourself. That's the Stoic reset. It's not a technique. It's not a hack. It's a reorientation of your entire relationship to worth. You stop locating your value in the territories you don't control and you plant it firmly, irrevocably, in the only territory that is truly yours. Your character. Your values. Your judgment. Your integrity. The things no one can give you and no one can take away. The world will keep trying to hand you its ruler. Every advertisement, every social media post, every interaction carries an implicit message about what you should value and what you should measure yourself against. You don't have to take the ruler. You can let it sit on the table. You can walk past it. You don't need it anymore. You have your own. So here is what I want you to take from this. Not a list of tips. Not a set of rules. A single, uncompromising decision. The decision to value your own judgment above all external noise. The decision to build rather than prove. The decision to say no without a performance. The decision to let people think what they think and remain undisturbed. The decision to reclaim the one thing that was always yours and that you were tricked into giving away. Your sense of your own worth. You wake up tomorrow and within 60 seconds it will start. The phone, the notifications, the low-grade anxiety, the world reaching in to tell you who you should be. And in that moment, before you engage, before you react, before you hand yourself over, I want you to remember one thing. You are not what they say you are. You are not what they think you are. You are not even what you feel you are in the weak moments. You are what you choose to build. And what you choose to build is entirely, completely, irrevocably up to you. Stop proving. Start building. Stay disciplined.